You want to
Ashish, Ashish, before we swap, I have got a question for Ashish. He told obsolescence is there in standard and not in framework.
Agreed. Let me elaborate on that point and thanks for pointing it out. My point is, obsolescence is there in the fact that you have to recertify yourself every 3 years. Your standard will expire. Also, the fact remains that after 3 years, they'll come up with something new. Which might not be a bad thing necessarily, but with a framework, you have to necessarily keep changing it based on your business need rather than an external input. So even if you have invested in a standard, it will still get expired and you still have to do it again. And that was my point. Thank you. Other question? Yeah, I can start. This is going to be tough.
I have noted down your points.
This point here that we have been arguing about, whether standards are important or whether frameworks are important. In my opinion, without a standard, there is no point in doing an implementation. Let me give you some examples here. I hope that I have this slide here. I have it in a different document. Let me show you. I want to get down into the genesis of why process groups were created in organizations. The first time quality department as such was created was when the ISOs came out. The whole point was that you have a standard, let's see what benefit it can give you, and you create a dedicated group of people who allow you to implement that standard in the organization. It gives you a goal. It tells you where exactly you want to go. I wonder if you have read Alice in Wonderland. And there the Cheshire Cat asked Alice. Alice is going somewhere and the cat appears magically. And Alice asks, where is this road going? The cat asks, where do you want to go? Alice says, I don't know. The Cheshire Cat says, then it doesn't matter. Say, what do you want? Unless you have a goal, unless you have an objective, there is no point in taking an endeavor at all. Standards are meant to be goalposts. Standards are meant to be things which an organization attains. And that is why they are there. Anybody can do a lot of things. But the entire organization working in tandem to attain a certain objective, that happens only when you implement a standard. I always argue, and I have often argued, that quality is a marketing investment. The reason we do quality implementations, the reason we do framework implementations is not because we want to improve our processes. It is because it is essential we improve our processes and show to the world that we are good. This is more so in the service sector scenario, where entirely the advent of the global delivery model, which is now 2 decades old as on date, I was reading an article on it the other day. It was meant to be a facilitator for processes, but it was a framework. The way we got a foothold into a lot of other companies is by saying that Indian IT companies are the best in the breed when it comes to processes. Let's move a little bit out of IT and let's talk about, say, manufacturing. It's not even an option. It's extremely interesting that in our industry, we are still arguing about the fact whether the standard is relevant or not, while in other industries, it's simply impossible for you to survive without them. I'll come to this point once again. But my first point remains that quality is a marketing investment. Unless you prove to the world that you have a certain level of standards available, you will not be able to succeed in the market in the first level itself. Also, let me come to this point once more. When you receive an IPO application, when a company is about to bring out its IPO, or when you are a shareholder of a company and you receive the annual report, obviously 80% of the information is financial, as it ought to be, but at least 10% of that annual report focuses on the standards that the company has. So even to get shareholders, even to get people to invest into their business, they need to rely on standards. It is also important to ensure that all your standards help you project the right image in the market. So that's why I first of all contain my point that having a standard is essential for you to remain relevant in the market. Now, we all agree that standards, processes, they help us develop a common vocabulary. vocabulary across the industry, across sectors, and help us compare and evaluate things together. As somebody was answering yesterday during a debate, where the CMMI for services was being compared with IDIL, and one of the points that came out so clearly at the end of it, everybody agreed on it, and even the person speaking against the motion said that if CMMI for services, the biggest benefit it brings to an organization is that now it can compare itself with another and say where exactly it stands. That was basically the point I was also trying to make with this slide. That when you have a way of comparing organizations, it can only be done through standards. Frameworks are important, definitely. But frameworks will not give you that benefit of comparison and showing to the world how exactly you're better than the other guy. And that is why I feel that standards are important from that aspect also. One more thing. Suppose you are going in for a government contract. By the way, the PSU sector spending in India also in IT has been increasing at the rate of about 80% per year. It's the largest expanding domestic IT market at this point of time. So much so that the Indian IT services companies, who in their beautiful arrogance for the last 20 years, they didn't focus on the Indian market, now have entire divisions catering to the needs of the Indian IT sector itself. In order to get those contracts, in order to get into those contracts, you need to have certain standards in place, and they are part of the RFP itself. And that is why, if you have to be in business, even for getting that business, you need to have that standard. So not only for getting a shareholder, you have to get the standard. For getting the business also, you need the standard. Obviously, it's important. Standards reduce the overall cost of implementation, and there are studies to prove that. I am just quoting one of them. It is often argued that frameworks are cheaper. What do you mean by cheaper? The cost of making mistakes? The cost of reinventing the wheel? The cost of doing something that somebody else has already done and published to the world and said this is the best way to do it? How exactly can you even think of the fact that if I am, as a startup, trying to implement incident management, security systems, and trying to ensure that whatever I do is the best in the world, can even survive without having a standard? I don't buy the point at all. In my opinion, if somebody is giving you a book of knowledge which has all the rules laid out, all the conditions laid out, that's a big boon for me. That's not a problem. I don't see that as a cost at all. My next point. Standards help a company remain relevant. And I believe my opponent will agree with me on this one. In most cases, standards are revised. People say, फिर से revise कर दिया, फिर से implementation करना पड़ेगा. But that is not the point. Why was the standard revised? It was revised because the industry moved forward. And if you want to remain at par and ahead of the industry, you need to conform to those standards. If you look at the way the standards have matured, and yesterday we again had a long discussion on this. It was a very fruitful discussion yesterday, really. We talked about the fact that standards not addressing multiple stakeholders, Prince2 not addressing a particular fact, and as things are moving forward, we are coming to a more unified view of how the project should be. Standards are also moving forward. So if you comply to a particular standard and that standard has changed, it is in your own benefit to make sure that you upgrade and get that benefit out into your organization also. So it helps you remain relevant. We all know what happens when rules are meant to be followed without any follow-up done. We have all seen examples where we have depended on the intent of people just to make sure that the processes are followed. It is often argued that if a process is so relevant, it should become a part of your organization and you should not need a policing body to basically make sure that the process is being followed. But the way the processes are now being defined, and if you look at, again, I go back to my agile argument again, whenever you look at a process being defined, if a standard has to be implemented, it can also be implemented in integration with the processes. The way of having a policing body doing all the checks manually is outdated. In most cases, we try to automate and integrate things and do self-reviews, do self-checks, do automated checks. Just to give you an example, for a company like, and I cannot quote a specific numbers, but let me still give this one, this is the public information. For a company like Infosys, high on quality, for the entire Pune Development Center, for a crowd of about 25,000 people in 2004, we had 15 people in quality. Do you think we used to do everything manually? Obviously not. Doing process checks, doing process audits does not mean manual work, does not mean checklist work. It means making sure that all the indicators of the project are in the green. So I don't buy that argument that just because you have to police something or govern something, you're basically trying to increase the cost. My final argument, and I love this one. It is often argued, somehow it was not argued today, but that standards curb innovation. Toyota, GE don't have standards, but they're so wonderful. Google doesn't have standards, but they're so wonderful. On a side note, Microsoft actually has level 5 for their services division. It's in Hyderabad. This was a question which was put forward to Sumita Hari from Deloitte in a PMA conference earlier this year, and she gave this beautiful example. Microsoft overall is not CMA level 5, but when they are into services and approaching clients, they have level 5 for that. Now, coming back to this part. It is said that standards do not encourage innovation in a company. This is a study. I have a copy of this. I can share it with you. Beautiful study. And it says that innovation in a company is more when standards are implemented. The basic premise being that innovation itself requires groundwork to be done, which can only be done if you have followed standards and made sure that people have the environment available to implement it. Innovation is only done when you are focused. Innovation is only done when information is distributed evenly. Information is only done when the infrastructure is in place. I haven't said this. It's there in the study. I've just copy-pasted it. All this information leads me to say that the benefits of implementing a standard far outweigh implementing a framework. Frameworks definitely are helpful. But what am I trying to derive out of my implementation is a business benefit, is a benefit in terms of my revenue, is a benefit in terms of my credibility. And I think all these things are answered only when I implement a standard.
Thanks, Ashish. Can you just put this slide as it is? According to you, this is innovation, right? Yeah. So this is with standard, right? Okay. And this is one of the studies, right?
I can show you this.
No, that's okay. I just want to know. This is a study, right? Okay. I beg to differ on this study completely, and I'm ready to debate on if the person who has made this study to come in front of me and discuss.
Actually, it's not just one. There are multiple studies.
Okay. No, I'm talking about this study. Portrait is how can you portray multiple studies? And I just have 1.5 hours actually.
There are multiple studies that show that innovation is sustained more in industries with standards of followed.
Hold on.
It's a very burning question.
I know. That's what we are here to discuss, and you have just changed your shoes, so you are saying that. So don't worry. Anyways, innovation will never come when there are standards. If we say standards, we talk about what we have as of day today in the market. I'm focusing upon those standards. Discipline should not be military. If you are too much focused and too much standardized in your work, you won't be able to get the exact outcome. Rather, instead of becoming a human being, you will become a robot, wherein you are standardized to do this as and when this command comes, and you don't know what exactly you should do according to your particular scenario. If I talk about, you say, there are companies like Toyota and Google, they are not standardized yet, they are doing well, one of the examples. It has been proved in the studies that by Gartner Group, 80 to 140% of returns, 80% to 140% of the returns are being taken out of the different frameworks like ITSM and COVID, which are there into the market, and they are effective enough to get that returns out of it. You said that the cost or implementation of the standardization is much lower than that of the adoption of the frameworks. I beg to differ on that. Why? Because this is just one aspect of it. And the problem is you don't easily buy things, even though they are good in the market. Okay. So the point is, standards which are there in the market, I agree that they would be cheaper to implement, but the returns which we get out of the different frameworks which are there in the market gives the optimum results out of it. I'll give you some examples. The growing adoption of the IT best practices has been driven by a requirement for the IT industry to better manage the quality and reliability of IT business and respond to a growing number of regulatory and contractual requirements. IT best practices framework